Today on Keep Shooting Monday, how to choose your exposure. Hey everyone, Greg Cazillo from Cazillo.com. Welcome to another Keep Shooting Monday. Last week I posted about the new high key assignments, so make sure you get those up. We don't have a lot of photos in there. By the way, high key does not only mean studio, it can also mean a photojournalistic or anything you want it to be. Basically, the background just needs to be brighter than the foreground. So get those photos posted. Hopefully you'll have shot a lot of them this past weekend, and so get them up. Also, from last week, I mentioned Amazon links. Now I have them for our Canadian, UK, and German viewers. So if you would head over to Cazillo.com/support, please use them whenever you shop on Amazon.com, and I thank you very much. While you're on Cazillo.com, make sure you sign up for the newsletter. I actually have a new ebook and a contest coming up soon. So be sure to sign up and you'll be notified of every Keep Shooting Monday and any other video in that newsletter. So head over there, sign up, get the free ebook, get the free everything that I offer. It's all in that one place. And so yeah, make sure you sign up. This week in photography news, first thing there, Nikon released new firmware for the D4, D3S, D3X, D3, D7000, and D3200. All the DSLRs. So here's a link over to Nikon Rumors with detailed product roundup, give you some links to those new firmware. I haven't updated yet, but I will let you know if there's any issues that I found, but most likely there won't be. Last week I also talked about a PDF on copyright. Here's actually a longer lecture from a couple of, I believe they're lawyers anyway, about copyright and how to protect yourself. So head over to Vimeo or this link on DIYphotography.com, I think it is, I hope. Anyway, head over there, watch this. It is a rather long lecture and long video, so make sure you grab a cup of joe, be ready to sit down and watch it. It might be one of those things where you just watch it a little bit at a time and kind of save your place and come back to it, but I definitely think it is worth a watch. Lastly, Adobe released Adobe Lightroom 4.4 with updates, or actually I should say support for the Nikon D70-100 in RAW mode. And so head over to Adobe and download it. Here's a link with the full details on everything that they changed in this version. And if you are using Photoshop CS6, they also updated Adobe Camera Raw. So now, Cazillion questions. I want to buy a DSLR for myself. For me, the picture quality and zooming performance matters, so which brand and model would you suggest for me? Well, I'm probably going to get a little bit of flack for this, but I am a Nikon fan. I've been shooting Nikon forever and ever since my second DSLR. I got rid of my 8E1, which is my first one. I actually gave it to a friend, and I have had Nikons ever since. Point being that since I am a Nikon fan, I always suggest the Nikons, but in general, here's what you should do. Number one, you need to go to a store, play with the cameras. Do the controls make sense to you on one camera versus another? I strongly suggest sticking with either Nikon or Canon. They both make excellent cameras that produce wonderful pictures. As far as the zooming performance is concerned, that's where you just need to buy a longer lens. And when you're buying those lenses, be careful of the variable aperture lenses. Know what you're getting, know what you're buying, and realize you're going to lose a stop and a half, maybe 2 stops of light when you do zoom in. Other than that, you just got to get into the store, put your hands on a camera, and play with it, and then test it out and buy it. Just looking on the internet to see what everybody else thinks, it just doesn't work. So get out there, go to the store, go to Best Buy, go to a camera store, go somewhere, figure out what you want, play with them all, and talk to the guy. But Nikon or Canon, I prefer the Nikons, other people prefer the Canons, I understand that. But other than that, you really can't go wrong with either one of those cameras. What is color fringing? When does it occur? How to avoid and how to remove it? Color fringing comes in a number of different forms. the most popular, if you want to call it that, of which is where you kind of have this kind of weird purplish, bluish ring around edges where there's a lot of contrast in between dark and light. Last Thursday I posted a video on it and how to work on it in Adobe Lightroom 4. How to get rid of it. Typically your better quality lenses are going to be able to control it better, and the ones with the newer, Nikon calls them nano coatings, they're going to control it a lot better. Same with lens flare, which is also a form of fringing. You'll get like this weird, yellowish or bluish tint in some of the darker areas. Doesn't always bother me personally. I actually had to look through a ton of photos, couldn't find any, so I went over and found some from a Cazillo, and it actually helped me out on the forum. Roy, he sent me a couple photos, so check out the video. There's a little more information on how to edit it, and there's also some links with more educational places where you can really get more in-depth on color fringing and also chromatic aberrations. Greg, I'm still having problems with getting the floor good and white. Backgrounds and subject lights are good, but they're creating a good 100% white floor section without overexposing the subject is troublesome. Shaggy, there is really only one way to do this, to have a solid white throughout the bottom, the floor area, where you're going to sit your product or stand your person, as well as the background, and that's to have your light coming up through. There's just no way to really get that if you're not going to overexpose, say, if it's a person standing on the background, or say it's a little kid standing on the background and like I don't know, say it's like gymnastics or something like that. They're standing on that white background. You're going to overexpose them if you try and light that floor area. It's just the way it is. So how we do it in product photography is we actually have there's a special rigs, there's special things that allow you to push that light up through it with actually a translucent plastic material, almost like a big sheet of, I don't know what you want to call it, but basically thin sheet of plastic that's opaque, bounce the lights through it, and that allows you to get that perfectly white bottom, and it just makes it a lot easier when you're doing that product photography. That's not really working very well when it's for people. It means you got to have a big, huge rig, and you need to build it up like a stage area. Then you need to make sure people don't fall through, and it would be a huge mess in order to do that. So this is one of those times where if you do want it to be perfectly white, you need to take it into post and edit a little bit. You should be able to get a good preset either in Lightroom or in Photoshop, and then apply that preset to all of your photos if it's something that you really need. Personally, it doesn't super bother me. In this particular set, actually, as you're looking at it right now, I have my softbox right here, which is my main light. I have a light over here, which is my fill light. It's straight, and then this one's at a 45-degree angle coming in this way. Then I have two lights here and here, just out of camera shot, and those are my background lights. That's going to be similar to what you're doing when you're working with a high key setup, and this is what you want. You want that kind of, two lights hitting the background and then a separate amount for the foreground. Now, in order for that floor to work out, it's just the way it's going to be. So I can't really think of any way. Maybe if you put some umbrellas on these two background lights, that might smooth the transition a little bit so it's not quite as harsh. You could also just try the bare bulb or a big softbox for the background so that you have a nice transition and a nice curve, that kind of a shadowy curve that looks a little bit better if you didn't want to edit it. But I would play with your lighting, try and get something good and set up an acceptable. If you absolutely have to have it pure white, then you have two options, either to edit that floor or to cut out the person completely and then drop them onto a pure white background. Those are really going to be the only two ways. But one other thought, if you do that and you're cutting them out and you're putting them on something else, having it pure white all the way through, there's no dimension there. And so your eyes are saying, well, why is this person floating? So you really kind of need something for them to sit on and to land on. And so I would really just look at some other photos on the internet that you like and figure it out for yourself that way. So those are my suggestions. For the life of me, I cannot always fix my clipping. When I notice it, I try to adjust my settings, and I try, adjust up and down, one stop, two. Try so many other possibilities and nothing helping. Aaron, the first thing you need to understand is that not all clipping is bad. On the right side of the histogram are your highlights, on the left side are the shadows. If you have a flat spot or no data on the left side, that's actually not a problem at all. You can just drag that slider over. But your general idea is that you want to expose for the highlights and then print for the shadows. What does that mean? That means you want to be pushing your histogram over to the right side whenever possible. Now, that might cause some spikes on the right of the histogram, but you need to correlate and understand what is causing those spikes. That spike on the right side means that you're losing data, or you're clipping, as you talked about, which is the proper term. But if it's, say, a window in the background and it's a bright sunny day, but you're inside in a dark room, there's nothing you can do about it unless you're going to add flash. Or maybe it's in the evening and you're taking photos, and maybe it's just an overhead light or something like that. And again, it's a very brightly lit something that's just in the background, but your foreground is normally exposed. Don't worry about it. There might be other times when you have those spikes, and say you're doing an interior photograph similar to this one, where you want your interior to match the exterior, and the only way to fix those spikes is to add additional lighting on the inside, and so that the two of them match. Play with your exposure, play with your shutter speed, bring it up a little bit so that everything matches and everything works together. Here's some more information on your histogram. Make sure you watch that. And then I also have this link, Cazillo.com/basics, which goes over all of the basics. These 7 videos are an awesome collection of videos, and they should really help you to learn your exposure. One more segment I'm going to have for today, and that's going to be talking about how I choose my exposure. From what I can tell, a lot of people think that choosing their exposure is just this kind of voodoo weird thing that sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't, and if you put it on program mode, it'll just be fine. I'll just use shutter priority or aperture priority for everything. And the worst auto mode to turn on of all is auto ISO. Strongly suggest not using it. Anyway, the method that I use is to, number one, always set your aperture first, okay? Your aperture is going to, most of the time, have the greatest impact on how your photo looks. It's controlling the amount of light that's coming into the camera, and it's also controlling your depth of field. So that's always number one. That's why I always use aperture priority over shutter priority. It's very, very rare that I'll use shutter priority. If I did need to make sure that my shutter speed is high enough, what I'll do is I will set my camera on aperture priority, then raise my ISO up a little bit, up enough so that my shutter speed stays in the range where I need it, for example, sports photos. So as we just learned, aperture is set first. Next is your shutter speed. Now, if you need a higher shutter speed, then your aperture is probably going to need to be wider open, say at f4, maybe f2.8 if you have a faster lens, so that you can let in more light, and then you have a shorter duration of time with your shutter speed. Now, what do you need to do with the shutter speed? Typically, you're going to be stopping action. If it's just kids running around, 1/125th, maybe 2/50th is plenty. If you're talking about a real fast-moving object, a runner moving left to right, or jumping, stuff like that, you might need to be at a 500th, or if you really want to catch a stop action of, say, someone throwing a baseball, you might need to be a little higher, and that's one of those things that you just need to kind of play with and understand what the proper shutter speed is for you now, and basically what you want to create. So start with that aperture, then to the shutter speed. By the way, don't forget about keeping your shutter speed above your zoom position of your lens so that you don't have any lens, what's the word I'm looking for? Camera shake, that's it. You can turn on your VR, although I typically suggest using it sparingly. Lastly, as always, your ISO, and you just use the meter in your camera, the little dots, the little line thing on the right or bottom side. It's typically the right or the bottom, I think, on most cameras. And take a look at that scale, read your manual if you don't know how to use it, and get it in the middle, take a photo, and then take a look at it, look at the histogram, see how it looks. Check that clipping, make sure you understand what's happening with the histogram. Are you under or overexposed? And then adjust your ISO accordingly. ISO is always last, never use auto ISO. And so I think that's all the points that I wanted to make. So questions or anything, ask away. Greg Cazillo, Cazillo.com. Thanks guys, keep shooting.